Okay. My VTuber Studio app kept crashing and I was about to lose my damn mind. And then it wasn't connecting and I was just like, oh no. I was literally about to have a panic attack, honestly. It was not fun. Oh my god, that was just the funniest thing. Oh my god, that was just so funny. Imagine having a mental breakdown on screen. Couldn't be me. Oh man, that was just so funny. Alright. But anyways, hello. I am your one and only villainous Viliana. And I'm, as you can tell, I put my schedule up. Finally. After I was fighting with it. Because everything kept misaligning for like an hour. All because it was me mainly doing it. Because I was just like, my cat. And I was just like, can you just please stop? I'm just trying to do my damn schedule. And then I realized it was made as MP4. And I'm just like, oh. It's going to post it anyways. Because you know what? I'm not going to change it. All right. But, as today is, but, no. Well, if you did see it, I have like two reading corners. I have two reading corners this week. Because I do want to get through this book, like, by the end of the month. Or I do want to finish it. So probably gonna do, yeah. It's like I forgot the next time. I guess Thursday. I think Wednesday or Thursday. I forget, but I know another time this week is when I'm gonna be doing another reading corner. So yes. All right. No. I don't think I'm doing much. Think I don't think that I'm aware of. Let's see. Yeah, I think everything is all right. Besides, yeah. Honestly, besides my oh my god, VTuber Studios just conking out on me at the worst possible second. It was fine this morning when I was testing it out, but you know, always when I'm trying to do something, oh yeah, it's just like, hey, fuck you. Alrighty. I don't want to spend too much time talking because I just really want to get into it because, like I said, I do want to finish this book by the end of the month or at least within a decent amount of time. Alrighty. Just okay, got something to drink. Got my book. Oh yeah, that's what I was gonna do. No, like. I mean, it'll probably bring in people. Yeah, man, that's funny. That was funny. Oh man, that's funny. I'm sorry, that was just so funny. I didn't think of that until now you said something. Oh my god, I can't unsee it. How dare you? That's funny. I can't unsee it now. Thanks for that. Damn. Oh man. I said I didn't want to talk too much, but then here I am talking. So I popped off my nails yesterday. I wear fake nails. I didn't pop off my real nails. That would hurt that would hurt. Yeah, I popped off like my fake nails yesterday, and then I was like, oh, okay. Because both my thumbnails popped off randomly when I was doing stuff. So I'm just like, ugh, okay. So now it was just like, basically 1/5 of my hand was just not have nails on it. So I left it. So it didn't bother me for a while until it did start bothering me. So yeah, I'm just letting my nails breathe for a little bit. Until I redo them. Okay. Okay, got everything set up. Yes, yes, yes. Hopefully YouTube Studios doesn't conk out on me. Alrighty. Oh, and also, if anybody noticed, like on the 11th, I'm doing something that day, but the person hasn't said they'll get back to me that day. So I'm not sure what I'm doing. I'm not sure what time yet. I'll re-say it back. I'll re-say it at the end of my stream. Okay. Alrighty then. I think at the... What about Tchaikovsky? Yes, Tchaikovsky. I'm just making sure. Oh. Alrighty, okay, yeah. Okay, so let us move over here. Okay, let me get everything set up. Okay, everything seems all right. Okay. I was just doing a little bit of a sound check because I know that the music is like really weird sometimes, so yeah. Alrighty. So let's get to it. Now, last time our main leading lady, Kyla, she met she met that one guy. What's his fucking name? Loran. I don't know how the fuck you say that name. It's whatever. Loran. And she has a talking spider plant named Kaz. Thank you for best mod. Hello, welcome in. I'm Viliana, your one and only villainess. And you're here just in time for me to start my little reading corner. See, it's gonna be a little bit, maybe it's almost the duration of this playlist.
Why is the rum always gone?
Thanks, Jay. Well, I was about to. So yeah, Kyla met Laron because Laron was being a bit nosy. And I don't hate you. And then Kyla and Kaz started just, setting the house up to be livable. I'll probably go up until, yeah, probably up to 11. Yeah. Alrighty. Let's get to it. Okay. Hi, Takio. Actually, I'm about to start. Alrighty. So yeah, I'm probably just gonna go until like 11. See how far we get. Alrighty. Kyla put off her trip to the village until sundown, by which time it was, of course, far too late to go anywhere, and she was far too exhausted from the work they'd done anyway. After eating half dried peaches and several fistfuls of pecans, she collapsed into the day bed and slept far more soundly than she ever had in the library. She didn't even hear the owl outside. At dawn, she woke to a tickle on her cheek. "Don't scream," Kaz said in her ear, but he's back. Her eyes popped open and she shivered. She should have grabbed an extra blanket. She'd grown too used to the always the same warmth of the library. She'd forgotten it was cooler on College Street in the mornings, even in summer. What? Who? Kaz corrected. Him. Him. Wait. Did he mean the neighbor, Laron? Why was he back? She thought her scream had been enough of a hint that she didn't like impromptu visitors, especially while she was asleep. Couldn't he just leave them alone? Sitting up, she peered out the window. It was still coated with grime. We'll have to clean that, she thought, though she knew they had other priorities, such as food. Her stomach grumbled in agreement, though the streaks of dirt she saw their tall, broad neighbor striding away toward the path he and his scythe had created. It looked as if he'd come, see they weren't awake, and then left. At least he didn't let himself in this time, she said. Why had he come? Couldn't he just stay in his own house and she'd stay in hers? Did she need to put up a fence or a large keep out, no trespassing sign? She waited until he was out of sight before she got out of bed and padded to the door. On the front step before the mostly broken door was a basket with several glazed cinnamon raisin buns, as well as 3 chicken eggs and a wedge of cheese. Okay, well that's nice. Cinnamon raisin? Ew. Man, I don't like him no more. Cinnamon raisin. Ew. Ew. Gross. Throw it out. Throw the whole man out. Fine. He was nice, friendly neighbor who didn't understand property lines. She scooped up the basket and scurried back into the house, closing the door behind her. Sitting on a recently cleaned chair, she bit into one of the buns. Sugary sweetness exploded in her mouth, and she sighed through the bread. Closing her eyes, she savored every morsel. It was light, fluffy, sweet, and perfect. Had he made this? How? She added baking to the growing list of useful skills she didn't possess. Goral. She has no life skills. Damn. She is so me, but then she's not me. I at least know how to cook. Eagerly, she picked up the wedge of cheese and bit into it. Sharp, woody flavor filled her mouth, and she swayed a bit as she shoved more into her mouth. Cheese in the city was typically soft and bland, intended to be spread or melted. A side note to the main dish, but this, it demanded to be devoured. After she polished off half the wedge, Kyla discovered a note in the basket. Welcome home, it said. She felt her stomach clench. Home? Was his home? Kyla placed the note down and stared at the words. She couldn't name all the emotions that the simple 2-word note made her feel. Hopeful? Terrified? Sad? At least I'm still not hungry. She contemplated the eggs. If she could start a fire in the wood-burning stove, then she could cook them and have protein inside her.
Migraine will all...
easy to face a village with protein. How hard could it be to start a fire? The revolutionaries hadn't had any trouble doing it. Remembering the smell of smoke in the library, Kyla squatted in front of the stove without doing anything for a very long minute. Then she shook herself and took the fire starter off the hook by the hearth. Do you know what you're doing? Kaz asked. Theoretically. I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. He's so real. Kyla wasn't sure she was either. Do you want to light it? Definitely not. He's a freaking plant! She needed fire to cook, and eventually they needed to warm the house. Winters this far north could be extremely cold. She remembered how beautiful the snow was. But she would also remember how cold the cold would seep down your throat and numb your fingertips. She nearly lost a toe to frostbite once. Snuck inside the library, Kyla hadn't had to think about the day in a long time. But she remembered how her father had blown on her toes to warm them and wrapped her in multiple sweaters. Her mother had scolded her for staying out so long and then had given her a book to read until they judged her recovering enough to play outside again. Previously, frostbitten toes were more prone to frostbite, Bates said. She had to be careful. She shook herself out of the memory. It wasn't anywhere near winter, but still, this was a skill she thought she could master easily enough. There was already wood inside, as well as plenty of dried leaves that could serve as kindling. They must have blown down the chimney. Stay back, Kyla warned, and Kaz retreated to the far side of the room. She struck the fire starter. Happily, a spark jumped at her very first strike. Easy, she thought. I can do this. She lit the kindling, then closed the door to the stove. Stepping back, she listened in satisfaction as the fire within spread and crackled. She held her palm above the stovetop. It wasn't hot yet, but would be soon. Wrinkling her nose, Kyla tried to ignore the scent of burning dust. It occurred to her that they should have cleaned out the inside of the stove before lighting a fire. It had just seemed that, with the wood already in there, oh well, it would burn away. She just had to wait it out. She turned back to the cabinets to locate the pan they'd found yesterday. Setting it on the stove, she left it alone to heat up. While she waited, she pumped water to wash her face, and she dressed in one of the sets of clothes that she brought from the city. It was a beige tunic-like outfit, with soft pants perfect for scuttling around the library. Looking down at herself, she wasn't certain it was town appropriate or attractive. Then who was she trying to impress? Certainly not her neighbor. Most certainly not. Oh my god, I love her. I love her so much. Oh my god. She was hoping not to see him again, even if the cinnamon buns had been delicious. Kyla? Kaz asked. There's smoke. It's the dust burning off, Kyla said, but there did seem to be a haze in the room. A rather thick haze. Smoke was billowing out of the stove. She coughed and inhaled a breathful of it, and instantly she was back in the canals, with the library burning above her and the bodies in the water. She shut off the memory and ran to the sink. Pumping water, she filled the jar. Kaz scuttled to the front of the house and pulled open the door with his tendrils. The smoke rolled outside, but all that Kyla could think was, save the books. I have to save the books. Kyla knelt in front of the stove and reached open the door. She stopped an inch from the handle as heat hit her palm. Searching frantically, she located a kitchen towel and used it to yank open the door. Smoke poured out into her face and she fell backwards, coughing. She made herself lean forward and tossed water onto the fire. It sizzled and more smoke billowed. Kyla ran back to the sink for more water. Jar after jar, at last every ember was out. Kyla stumbled out of the house, hands on her knees, trying to get a full, fresh breath. In her mind, she heard the screams from the city, and she imagined the books were screaming. That's past, she told herself. Not now. You're okay. That's over. Oh, she's traumatized! Ah! Poor girl. Wasn't it? Or was she just going to feel this way every time she smelled smoke? Girl, that is trauma. Ugh. Ads. Beside her, Kaz was shaking so hard that his leaves rustled. That smell. I can't. She laid her hand on one of his tendrils, and he wrapped a leaf around her wrist. Oh, he's also traumatized! Oh, poor baby. Poor baby plant. They clung to each other like that for a long moment, until her lungs felt full of fresh air. We can't let this happen again, Kaz said fervently. Kyla wasn't certain if he was talking about the stove or the city. It'll air out now if we leave the doors and windows open. Maybe stick to cold food from now on, he suggested. Till I figure out how to harvest, fish, hunt, or any of that, I'm going to have to go into the village if I want any kind of food, hot or cold. A house full of smoke seemed like a hint that she could go now, before she messed anything else up in her attempt to be self-sufficient. Kaz ruffled his sleeves. You going to leave me here? Only because I thought you wouldn't want to come with me. Do you? Of course she didn't want to go alone, but was it wise for him to come? She didn't know what the village would be like. In particular, how they'd react to a talking spider plant. Kaz was highly unusual. He was a result of a reckless librarian experimenting with an incomplete spell that she didn't have permission to use. The librarian had been caught and punished, harshly, in Kyla's opinion. Wanting to make an example of her, the Emperor had ordered one of his sorcerers to transform her into wood. Bro! Hi, Coco. How are you? Turn her into wood? She'd been displayed amid other statues in the library's famed North Reading Room. Afterward, alone, Kaz had wandered the stacks until he found Kyla. Oh my god. They turned her into a piece of wood and displayed her. Oh, that's fucked up. She was made into a wooden statue. That's fucked up. Oh my god, wait. Did they get to the Northern Library in the beginning? Wait, I think they... Oh my god, she was there, so she burned. Oh, shit. Oh, that... Oh god, that sucks. That sucks significantly. Oh, shit. She still didn't know why he'd chosen her, but he'd announced that he was her new assistant, replacing a boy with continually grubby hands who would not stop snacking on honey treats near the books. And that was that. Are there any goats in the village? Kaz asked. I don't know. Rabbits? He shuddered. Other herbivores? Possibly. Then I have an idea. How about you leave me here? Kyla smiled. Good idea. Then her smile faded. Stay safe, Kaz. Come back soon, he told her. She fully intended to. Bringing a sack, slightly worn but with a charming acorn-shaped button she'd found, Kyla headed down the trail that her new neighbor, Laurent, had sliced through the greenery. It was a perfect day, blue sky peeking between the trees. birds warbling to one another, a breeze from the sea that carried the fresh scent of salty air. Within the walls of the library, she'd forgotten the wonder of a summer breeze. She loved the way it caressed her cheeks, and the way the smells of the earth, the trees, and the sea filled her mouth, nose, and throat. By the time she'd walked a quarter of a mile, she'd convinced herself that this was an excellent idea. Everything was going to be fine, and she shouldn't worry. But then the trail through the woods ended, and her path opened onto a cliff. And every single worry came crashing back into her, like the waves on the rocks far below. Ahead of her was the expanse of sea, broad and blue and beautiful and intimidating. Below, at the base of the cliff, was the village, just as intimidating in its own prestige way.
You know, I've always found it strange. People really want to say...
A waterfall tumbled beside the village, and the mill's water wheel turned in the force of its fall. Catching the sunlight, the spray looked like a cascade of diamonds. She flashed back to being 6 years old at the top of these cliffs with her father beside her. He took her hand and helped her down the wind-battered stairs. Ah, yes. There were supposed to be stairs. She remembered now. Searching, she spotted them, behind a row of wild roses, and she also saw what had to be Laurent's house. Beyond the base of the stairs on a rocky beach, she wondered if she'd been unfair to him. It wasn't his fault she liked her privacy. Maybe now that he'd welcomed her, he'd give her some space. A boat with a white sail floated just off the shore and saw the silhouette of a man standing on its bow. Laurent? Possibly. Around him in the water were mer-horses. The horsefish were pawing at the waves as the man raised his arm in the air, some kind of signal. In a herd, the mer-horses galloped toward deeper water. Shielding her eyes from the sun, Kyla watched them as they swam farther out, toward the local fisher folk in their boats. The fisher folk greeted them with happy shouts and cheers that traveled over the water. Her parents hadn't wanted this life for themselves or for her, but standing in the rose-framed cliff, she looked over the sparkling ocean. She wondered what was so bad about it. Gathering her courage, she picked her way down the wooden steps. Wind whipped her blue hair into her face and then vertically into the air, but she didn't dare let go of the railings to push the strands behind her ears or to twist them into a braid like she would have in the library. She got 2 hands! She could hold on to the rail for one hand and do the other. Hello? She just let them blow, wild and free. Halfway down, the wind pulled at her hair. She felt unglued, like a book whose page was scattered onto the floor. She couldn't shake the sense that if she released the railing, she'd fly into the air like a bird, which would be ridiculous, she told herself firmly. I love her so much. She's just so sassy. I love her. The stairs twisted as they clung to the curve of the cliff, but none of the steps broke beneath her feet. And by the time she reached the bottom, her heart wasn't hammering quite so hard. She was able to take normal-sized breaths. Glancing up, she wondered how she was going to climb up it again without either panicking or having delusions of flight. She reminded herself that she'd climbed bookshelf ladders and the flimsy spiral stairs in the library all the time without blinking an eye. There wasn't wind between the shelves, she thought. Yeah, I guess, no, honestly, yeah. Patting her hair, she tried to tame the flyaway strands, but they stayed a wild halo of blue. Inside the library, lit by lamps, her hair usually was a respectable shade of night sky blue, but out here in the sunlight, it was an unruly sapphire. That sounds so pretty, hello? That really does sound so pretty. Giving up on it, Kyla walked toward the village. It was strange, overlaying the reality in front of her, on top of her memories. In some respects, not much had changed. There was the mill, the school, the colorful houses along the cobblestone streets. But while memory was fuzzy, the details of the reality in front of her were sharp. The bright-colored paint was peeling off the walls, and the roofs had been patched and repatched. Several of the houses had their windows boarded up, and there were clear evidence of storm damages that hadn't been fixed. Collapsed porches, turned up cobblestones, broken trees that should have been hauled away. Only the thick storm shutters on the doors and windows looked new, and many of them were rough and unpainted. Kyla frowned. She'd always thought of Cautry as a prosperous, albeit tiny, village, but there were signs everywhere that the village had fallen on hard times. Children playing in the street looked thin. Their clothes flapped flag-like as they ran barefoot past her, rolling a hoop over the cobblestone with a stick. Hello? Looking up, Kyla saw the winged cats. I love the winged cats. Winged cats on the rooftops, sunning themselves, but they too seemed thinner and rougher. One eyed her as it licked its fur. Its green and yellow feathers looked battered as if it had flown through a storm. Maybe it had, but why? She remembered those cats as always plump and pampered. Seated on his front step, an old man watched her as she walked by. She tried to smile at him, but she was feeling such a jumble that she wasn't sure what her face looked like. She hoped it wasn't a grimace. He grunted back at her, neither friendly nor unfriendly. Kyla remembered the way to the grocer's, up 2 streets, and then a right at the fountain, which was now dry. She remembered how much she used to love the statue of the mermaid at the center of the fountain. As a child, she'd felt as if the smiling mermaid were inviting her into the heart of the town. Now, though, one of the mermaid's arms had broken off, and she gazed out at the harbor with an expression that Kyla thought was more wistful than welcoming. Ugh! Wow. Damn, that's rough. That is rough. Staring at the fountain, she heard the faint sound of a harp. Somewhere, someone was playing a complex tumble of notes that ran as pure as a fountain used to. Following the harp music, she passed the dry fountain, expecting to find the grocer's just around the corner, but in place of the shop she remembered with its wilty lettuce and oversalted lentils loaves, Kyla found a bakery. More accurately, she smelled it. Unlike the rest of the village, which was a shabby shadow of what it should have been, the bakery was glorious. Scents of fresh bread and honey and cinnamon poured out of its open door and windows, and the islanders. Everyone was here, or as everyone who wasn't working on the sea or on their farm or orchard. It looked to be mostly older islanders deep into their retirement, with faces worn from wind-sunned in time. And if she were being honest, it was less than a dozen people, but it felt like everyone. 6 times the number of people she wanted to see. Oh. I could come back later. No, you're already here, but buy what you need and then you can leave. Fair enough. Taking a deep breath, she approached the bakery. Outside on the cobblestone, tables where mismatched chairs were clustered in front of an open door and a wide window with a counter. One woman with crevice-deep wrinkles and black and white streaked hair had a lap harp on her knees. Like one of the librarians who'd worked on the 5th floor, she had 2 sets of arms. Very useful for shelving books and apparently just as useful for playing the cross-strung harp. She was plucking at the 2 sets of strings, creating both melody and harmony, an old sailor song that Kyla vaguely recognized. The falling notes of the harmony were the waves crashing on the sand, while the melody sang of the sailor's love for the sea. elderly centaur woman was beside her, seated with her horse at hindquarters on a broad bench. She wore a wide red dress and a matching red hat with a brim. Visible through the gaps of the dress, her horse body blended seamlessly with her human torso. Black horsehair matched equally dark skin. Her woman's head sported black hair that narrowed into a vertical stripe running down her spine, exactly like the mane of a horse's neck. She was drinking tea from a misshapen mug, blowing on it before she sipped. She lowered her drink when she saw Kyla and stared openly. She nudged her companion, who paused her harp playing to stare too. Bro, it's giving that one meme, bro, don't look. And then the fucking person looks. Kyla stared back. She'd never seen the multi-armed harpist before, but the centaur lady looked familiar. Kyla couldn't say how she knew her. All her memories of Caltree focused on her parents. I must have known other villagers, though. Maybe her? Several other men and women, mostly retired fisher folk and farmers, were seated at tables, eating their breakfast and chatting about the weather, the tea, their neighbors, and the sea. On the ground, an older bald man with silver scales instead of skin was playing a game with black and white stones with a boy who had tiny goat horns poking out of his hair. All of them stopped and stared as Kyla approached the bakery. Without the harp music, the loudest sound were the calls of seagulls and clangs of the buoy bells in the harbor, and the whispers of the strangers who wouldn't stop staring at her. This was a terrible idea. She should have come in a different time or not come at all, or searched harder for the grocers. She wondered what would happen if the man and woman who had run the local grocery store. As she recalled, they weren't the nicest people, but they did sell the essentials. Had they moved their shop elsewhere? I should look for it. But the wonderful smell kept her rooted in place. It was exactly like the delicious cinnamon bun that Laurent had left for her. I'm looking to buy some provisions. Kyla's voice came out far too shaky and high, curled up at the end as if she was asking permission. A woman bustled out of the bakery. She had an apron tied around her waist and smudged of flour on her cheeks. Like the boy playing on the ground, her body was covered in soft, tawny fur, and she had dainty antlers poking out of her hair, though hers were more deer-like than goat. The baker flicked a dish towel at her other customers. Hey, you lot, quit staring. You're making her uncomfortable. Can't you see she's about ready to flee? Where are your manners? Haven't you ever seen a new customer before? Nope. The boy with goat horns, son, nephew, no relation, said. The baker smiled broadly at Kyla. Welcome to Caltree and to the best and only. The harpist chimed in, balancing her harp on her knee with one hand. And the harpist chimed in, balancing her harp on her knee with one hand and held her teacup with the other. 3 hands. The centaur clinked the cup with her mug. They chortled like two friends with 100 in-jokes. The baker ignored both of them. Bakery in the entire island. Throwing her arms open wide, she said, I'm the owner and head baker, Bryn. And your first cinnamon bun is on the house. I ate one for breakfast. It was the most delicious thing I've ever tasted. Bryn beamed at her. I like her already. Anyone with a taste for sugar and cinnamon is automatically someone I want to know. Gesturing with her tea, the centaur woman cried, Oh, I know her. You think you know everyone. Her many-armed friend said, She's a little girl up the hill, the one who always had her nose in a book. Bina or Badan's girl. She looked like she'd won a prize by identifying her. To Kyla, she said, You look just like your mother. Kyla startled at the sound of her mother's name. She knew she should have expected it. There were bound to be people in culture who remembered her, and Kyla knew she did look familiar, with the same sky blue skin and jewel blue hair. Same eye shape too, her father's nose, or some people had said, but still it felt like lightning through her heart. You knew my mother? Benna, the dreamer husband of hers, left for the south, city-bound. The centaur flapped her hand as if this was utter foolishness. Whatever happened to them? Are they here too? I'm sorry, but no, Kyla said. They died. Ah, what a pity. My condolences. One of the other islanders called, Why'd you come back? Unlike the centaur, her tone wasn't friendly, and she was glowering so hard that her eyes vanished into wrinkles. Taking a breath, Kyla went with the same line that had worked so well with Laurent. I've had enough of the city. That won a few scattered nods, and especially from the centaur. The old man on the ground playing the game snorted, though. We don't need city folk here. Mark my words, she'll just bring trouble. Oh my... Why is it always the old fucking people? She'll bring trouble. I mean, you're still old and you're still here. You'll be alright. Why is it... Why... Damn, can nobody not live? Damn, in their own home. Okay. The four-armed woman whacked him with the top of his head with a napkin. Ow! Didn't you hear, Edie? She's not city folk. The centaur, Edie, said loudly. She's Benna's girl. Just look at her. Everyone stared again, and it took every ounce of Kyla's courage to stay standing in one spot and not pivot and race back to the steps and the overgrown cottage that was both familiar and unfamiliar. And she reminded herself, currently smoke-filled, because she was incapable of getting a fire going well enough to feed herself. I'm just looking to purchase a few supplies, and then I'll be on my way. On your way? You aren't staying? Bryn asked. She looked disappointed. You just arrived. You haven't even tried a fish pastry. It's my own recipe. The secret is to caramelize the onion and don't skimp on the garlic. That wasn't what Kyla was meant to say. She meant to say on my way, as in back to the cottage where she could hide from all these staring, overly interested eyes. I'm staying in the house, my family's house. I'm only meant that I'm not staying here in town, in this spot. You did come home, Edie said smugly. Everyone always does. Her parents didn't, the grumpy man said, which earned him another whack from the barpist. But a few of the others nodded with him as if that was expected fate of anyone who left Caltry. She felt the urge to defend her parents and their choices. They'd only wanted a better life for their family. What was so wrong about that? Bryn stepped forward and made shooing motions with her hands as if scattering chickens in front of her. That's enough, all of you. You're going to frighten her off. Going up to Kyla, the friendly baker hooked her arms through hers, which made Kyla want to flee even more. Come with me, I'll get you set up with whatever you need. Guiding her inside, Bryn pointed to a flour-dusted stool and insisted Kyla make herself at home. Kyla perched awkwardly and wished she'd had a better option than coming to town. While Bryn bustled behind the counter filled with buns, rolls, and loaves, Kyla glanced out the open door and wondered if all the customers were gossiping about her. Probably. The harp music had started again, but she could hear voices murmuring beneath it. They don't mean any harm, Bryn said. Don't mind them. How could she not mind? But Kyla said, it's fine. If you'd rather be offended, that's okay too. We Caltrians can be a lot nosy, pushy, and opinionated. That's just me. Now what do you need? Everything, she wanted to say. She needed her library back. She needed her parents, even though it had been so many years. She needed to feel safe again, and she needed to have a purpose again. She needed to be needed, and to be wanted. What came out of her was food, seeds, and maybe a chicken. She's struggling. She is struggling. Bryn's... Why am I getting so many fucking ads? Bryn squeezed icing onto a cinnamon bun and handed it to Kyla. I can't afford a welcome present, Bryn said. Kyla thought of the basket from Laurent. The same buns in them, as well as the same words in his note. The cinnamon buns with the traditional welcome and culture, she liked it. or if you prefer a good luck present for your new start. A new start. The bite of cinnamon bun hardened into cement in her throat, and she swallowed hard. Is that what this is? She suddenly felt as if her head was spinning. She was glad she was already sitting. She liked her life. She hadn't planned to leave it. How do I start over? The baker brushed the flour off her furry cheeks before climbing on her own stool. If you don't mind me asking, Bryn said, why uproot yourself and make such a change, and all the way from Elysium? Is it as grand as glorious as they say? I've never even been there. I'm originally from the Southern Isles. Left home after a family issue went bad, came straight to Caltry and never looked back. She chattered so fast that her words tumbled over one another, like a stream over rocks. And then when she finished, she waited expectantly, ever eagerly for Kyla to answer. Not thrilled to be focused on anyone's attention, Kyla squirmed on her stool. She did mind Bryn asking, and she had no idea how to answer. She doubted the news of the revolution had reached this far north, so she'd have to explain all of it. She knew how that would go. Lots of intense questions about her escape. It wasn't an experience she wanted to relive. And assuming she was able to choke out the story, she'd be admitting she was a librarian. What if they figured out she took the books? What if they guessed she hadn't had permission to take them? What if they thought she'd stolen them? What if they contacted an Imperial investigator? Kyla felt a chill thinking about them. Imperial investigators were called in whenever there were suspicions about the mishandling of magic. They had near limitless authority to punish offenders. What if they had her arrested and the books impounded? Or worse, destroyed? Illegal possession of spell books was a crime with very, very serious consequences. If she were arrested, what would happen to Kaz? Girl, she is thinking too much about this. I don't know, but those old people seem to be like wanting to cause trouble. Bryn asked with a sympathy in her voice. Was it a lover? No, Kyla realized she'd answered that too vehemently, and she felt herself blush. I mean, it wasn't anyone. There isn't anyone. It's just time to leave. Bryn nodded sagely. You don't like talking about yourself. I understand, and I won't ask any more questions. The muscles in Kyla's shoulders nodded at least a little. Thanks. Do you like talking about other people? Bryn asked. I know just about everything about anyone. I can tell you all their secrets as an apology for me trying to pry into yours. Kyla laughed in spite of herself. No, thank you. I don't need to know. Unlike me, I'd be nosy as hell. Like, shit, just tell me the most interesting thing you know. I would be that nosy ass person. Alright then, I think I know what you do need. I highly doubt that. What you need is savory pastry. Well, maybe. Her stomach let out a gurgle, and Kyla felt herself blush. She polished off the rest of the cinnamon bun. Bryn bustled behind the counter. Starting over is difficult work. You need fuel, protein, salt, nourishing fat. Humming to herself, she pulled out another pastry, ranged it on a dish, and sprinkled sea salt on top. As she worked, Kyla noticed the array of baked goods was decidedly different from what was available in the city. If this were Elysium, at least half the items would have been baked with jam and sugar-drenched fruit. Cherry tarts, raspberry swirls, apple turnovers. But Bryn's bakery had none of that. Lots of sugar and cinnamon and whatever it was she was praying for Kyla, but no splash of color from any kind of fruit. She wondered why. Jam was such an integral part of every bakery that Kyla had ever visited. It's my own recipe, Bryn said, carrying it over to Kyla. Go on, try it. My treat. You aren't going to stay in business if you keep offering free food. You'll upset me if you refuse, she paused. Unless you don't want it, or are allergic to seafood, or aren't in the mood for more food, or if so, I absolutely would not want. Kyla bit into the pastry and was surprised by the burst of salt that prickled her tongue, and the garlic that filled her sinuses. And the wonderful sweetness of, what is that? She asked as she chewed. It's a kind of fish that used to be plentiful around Caltry, the silver swiftfish. I've been working on a way to highlight the flavor. Do you like it? What? A fish pastry? Hello? She tasted swiftfish before, and it never tasted like this. The fish itself melted into the butter of the pastry, and she swallowed. She felt as if she were inhaling the bright vividness of the sea itself. It's incredible. With a modest shrug, Bryn said, With a modest shrug, Bryn said, "It's ingredients and a recipe. Anyone could do it. But you chose to do it." She took another bite, and it was just as good as the first. "Glad you like it," Bryn said. "We so seldom have new arrivals that I have forgotten how to make a new friend without scaring her off. I've known everyone on Kalchi for ages. Know everything about them, and I mean everything. Who snores? Who eats with their mouth open? Whose feet smell? But I'd hope, that is, I believe."
Migraine will always be.
Girl, what? Why would you want to know if somebody snored or not? But I'd hope, that is, I believe, that a proper pastry can make up for a wealth of social blunders. "A new friend." The words were such a surprise that Kyla nearly dropped the fish pastry, which would have been tragic. "I'm not looking for a friend. I have Kaz and my books." Traitorously, part of her whispered, "But I would like one." "I would like to know one thing about culture," Kyla found herself saying. "What's changed here? You don't remember it being so..." She searched for a word that wouldn't be so offensive. "Desperate?" Bryn supplied. It wasn't the word that Kyla would have chosen, but it would do. She nodded. Bryn sighed. Politics in the capital. Kyla felt a prickle on her scalp. "Oh?" "It used to be that the Emperor would send his sorcerers on a regular rotation to tend to the outer islands, and they'd cast spells that balanced out whatever nonsense they'd done in the capital city to throw the weather out of whack. But then they stopped coming. Fish began to get scarce, and the mer horses. You notice our local herd has dwindled, which makes the fishing even worse. All our weather patterns have changed due to city magic nonsense, and without a sorcerer to correct for that, our farms don't produce what they used to."
Why is the rum always gone?
Thanks, Jay. Pausing her breathless speed for a moment, Bryn nodded at the shelves of baked goods, and Kyla noticed for the first time that not only were they lacking in jam, they were only half full. She would have guessed the other half had been bought already, but perhaps not. And it's not that we're starving, but everyone worries that if the sorcerers in the south don't decide to pay attention to the Empire's citizens again. Kyla had heard a little about that, but she hadn't paid much attention since it wasn't library related. Over time, the Emperor had withdrawn his sorcerers from the other islands and canceled their circuits into outlying farms and villages. A waste of magic, he'd called it. There had been arguments. She'd read some of the discourse in the pamphlets written by the revolutionaries. The Empire was hoarding magic, and the outer islands, whose economies had become dependent on the renewal of the particular spells and on reliable weather patterns, were suffering because of it. She hadn't thought of what that meant on a practical day-to-day level. While the elite used magic to build their palaces and fuel their lavish lives, ordinary people suffered. That was the crux of the argument for the revolution. The world and its resources belonged to everyone, they said, which included everything kept locked up inside the Great Library. All that knowledge, the power to make lives better, was shelved away, reserved for use by only the wealthy, when it should belong to everyone. And that's why I never really believed they'd hurt the library, and why I don't understand why they did. They knew books were power. Oh. Kyla wondered what Bryn would say if she knew that a sliver of that power was currently sitting in crates in a rundown cottage beyond the cliffs. She also wondered what the Emperor would say. or would have said, before recent events. She remembered early in the revolution, a man, really a boy, he couldn't have been more than 17 years old, had tried to liberate one of the spell books from the first floor of the Great Library. He'd said in his trial that he wanted to use it to end a drought on one of the eastern islands. As his punishment, he'd been forced to drink water until his body convulsed. She didn't know if he'd survived or not. She did know that his image had been printed in the revolutionaries' pamphlets the following week. That's why some of the villagers aren't so happy to see you, Bryn said. They blame all city folk for the Emperor's new policies. But don't worry, they'll warm up to you once they open their eyes. Realize you're just another islander like them and not a big bad city dweller who kept magic locked up away from them. That was uncomfortably close to Kyla's job description. She wanted to protest that it wasn't a librarian's choice who accessed the books, but it was easier to nod and agree. Now, Bryn said with another of her enormous smiles, what can I help you with? Not gonna lie, that makes me upset, because if they did find out, they would blame her. Like she could do anything. And knowing old people, they want to blame everything else on everyone, on other people, besides people who are actually doing the shady stuff. I don't know, that's just irritating because that's the real thing that could possibly happen. I hate that. Kyla climbed the stairs up the cliff with a sack full of supplies, including a loaf of bread, a bag of sugar, a pot of honey, several bars of soap, and several packs of seeds. Also, she had a chicken under her arm. She hadn't actually meant to buy a chicken. She'd been thinking of the eggs that her new neighbor, Laurent, had left her, and how nice it would be to have a regular supply of them when the word had come out of her mouth, and Bryn had insisted on it. Thinking of the baker, Kyla smiled. The woman was a force to be reckoned with. Kyla didn't know if the village had a mayor, but if so, they were clearly overshadowed by Bryn. Or at least... Hi, Audie! Hello, everyone. Hello. Welcome in. I am Viliana, your one and only villainess. And it is my reading corner today. I am reading The Spell Shop. It's actually a good book so far. I really like the main character. But it's really nice to see you, Audie. If you have to raid and dash, it is perfectly fine with me. Just glad that you thought of me. What were you playing anyways? Or what were you doing? I saw you online, but I wasn't sure what you were doing. Thank you for the head pats. I felt that. Honestly, I still haven't figured out how protocors work, but like, they help. I usually do like the recommended ones. Yeah, I just do like the recommended protocors. So I'm just like, yeah, I don't have to worry about too much. Would you level up your protocors? Oh my god, I felt that. Honestly, five stars are good to have. But I know you could do good with a 4-star level team. Yeah, yeah, I know when I didn't have many 5 stars. Your biggest op. I'm sorry to laugh at your misfortune.
Move forward and flare less with
Yeah, it has like specific ones you have to. Yeah, it has you do like specific characters. I'm so sorry, Audie. Oh my god. I'm sorry. That's so funny. I'm sorry, Audie. You have to go through that. Oh man. So have it. He doesn't come in. He doesn't come in till like. I think you should be meeting him relatively soon. If I'm correct. You really should be meeting him soon. I believe in you, Audie. Alright, you have a good night. I will. Thank you for stopping by. That's for everyone else. If you just want to stay or you gotta leave, that's perfectly fine with me. I'm just glad you are here. Either way. Alrighty, let's get back to it. God, that was so funny. Yeah, Audie's op is Xavier, and it's so funny. Like, Okay, right, or at least overwhelmed by the flow of her words. She cajoled everyone until they produced everything that Kyla thought she needed. Flour, sugar, salt, butter, seeds for the upcoming garden, as well as soap and candles. Also a loaf of Bryn's bread, and of course, the chicken. Kyla had used up the vast majority of the coins she'd brought with her to Caltree, but she felt, with Bryn bargaining for her, she'd gotten a good price, even on the chicken. The hen squirmed a bit under Kyla's arms as she climbed, but once they were halfway up, the hen settled down. As if realizing she'd been in peril if Kyla dropped her, which at least showed some modicum of common sense. She'd been gone longer than she'd intended. Bryn liked to talk, especially at high speeds, and it felt as if everyone in the village who was on the shore wanted to meet the daughter of the nice, young, and foolish couple who'd left for the capital. But she thought that Kaz would be proud of her, and she was looking forward to not having to talk to anyone but the spider plant for a nice long while. As she made her way through the thick forest growth, following the trail hacked clear by the farmer, Kyla thought she heard voices ahead. Must be birds, she thought. Certainly no one was at the cottage besides Kaz, and he didn't have a history of talking to himself. Closer, though, it sounded like words, not bird songs. My imagination? She'd been part of more conversations today than in the past. Well, in a very long time. The voices were still ringing in her head. Except they sounded like Kaz and Laurent. He couldn't be back again, could he? So soon? She just finished talking with people. Lots of people. She wanted to burrow into her house and not have to worry about what she'd say and what he'd say and all of that back and forth talking nonsense. She's such an introvert, it's so funny. Stepping out of the woods, Kyla saw Laurent up on her roof. He had a tool belt strapped around his waist. He was shirtless and he was streaked with soot. Her brain caught on the shirtless detail for a moment, and she stared with her mouth open. She'd never seen quite so many muscles, and they all seemed to be in use as he worked on her chimney. No wonder I shrieked when he appeared so unexpectedly. He's huge! In close quarters, those are a lot of muscles. She's just stunned. Belatedly, she realized that Kaz was perched on the roof with him. His tendrils sprawled on either side of the ridgepole to keep himself balanced. He was telling Laurent about the time Kyla had accidentally lost her balance while on the top of one of the library ladders. Instead of falling backwards and merely injuring herself like a good little librarian, she'd grabbed the nearest books and somehow succeeded in knocking over the entire bookshelf. It had fallen onto the next It had fallen onto the next and the next, cascading into the most humiliating moment of her personal life. Oh, poor girl. Kaz, Kyla said sternly. What? It was funny. In hindsight, yes, hilarious, but was that really the best antidote to choose to tell their new neighbor? Especially since she'd been so careful to dance around the fact that she was a librarian in very recent conversations with the other villagers. How did Laurent know? How much did Laurent know? Had he seen the crates? Calm down, she told herself. Kaz wouldn't have been foolish enough to have allowed that. He was even more of a worrier than she was. Still, it was a risk, having a stranger anywhere near the spellbooks. Scowling at both of them, Kyla snapped, "What are you doing up there?" "Your chimney was clogged. Thought I'd fix it. And who had asked him to do that? Not me. And it's my chimney." Of course it needed fixing, and she had no idea how to fix it, but still, he hadn't known that. "You should start a fire in the stove with a clogged chimney. You'll get a lot of smoke." She noticed that between the clenched teeth. She said, "Thanks," Kaz said. "I tried to tell her." "You didn't," Kyla said. "You know less about chimneys than I do." At that moment, the chicken let out a squawk, and with a concerted effort, spurted out of Kyla's arms. No! She'd clearly gotten it all the way home. Dropping her sack, she chased after the chicken. The hen dodged left as she grabbed for it. She felt feathers as the chicken slipped through her grasp. It dashed by with an indignant squawk. She was aware of Laurent both watching her as she zigzagged across the yard after the chicken. She lunged forward as it turned right. Again, she nearly caught it, and then with a burst of speed, it plunged into the brambles. Kyla skidded to a stop, panting. She stared at the greenery. That went well. If you leave out feet, it will come back, LeBron suggested. Yay, more advice. Great, thanks, I'll do that. Catching her breath, she straightened and returned her sack, which thankfully didn't have anything within it that could escape. Although what she really wanted to do was tell him to go away. She had to ask, what do chickens eat? He gawked at her. He brought a chicken without knowing how to feed it. I lit a fire in the stove without knowing the chimney was clogged, she pointed out. I think it's safe to assume I don't know what I'm doing. He laughed, a very nice laugh. She appreciated that he didn't feel like he was laughing at her. Corn, oats, beans, but only if they're cooked, she said. Any of the fruit, whatever scraps you have from your meals, they'll eat just about anything. She wanted to ask what to do if the chicken didn't like her cooking and preferred whatever it found in the wild. She decided she'd already looked ridiculous enough in front of him for one day. Well, as soon as you're done. He patted the chimney as if it were a well-behaved pet. Just about done now. Let's try to light the stove. If it works, I'll cook up some eggs. You mean the eggs you gave me? He smiled. Yes. As a gift, those eggs. Yes, I'll cook them. And eat them, she said. He wanted to eat the eggs he'd given her as a gift, which made it not quite a gift anymore, did it? Fine, you fixed my chimney. A few scrambled eggs are better payment than coin. Confused, he frowned. I didn't ask for payment, and I didn't ask you to fix my chimney. She's not having it. I love her so much. Let's get this over with. She didn't want to owe him for this unasked for favor. He finished up as she went inside. After a day of cleaning, it didn't look overly terrible, especially given the years of neglect. Cats had made additional progress in her absence as well. She noticed that the quilt was back on the daybed and the pockets of dirt were piled neatly in various spots around the room. Cass made himself at home. That was a good thing. Also a good thing, if no longer smelled like smoke. Pecking into the back room, Kyla noted the crates were still covered by the tarp. They didn't look as if they'd been disturbed.
Why is the rum always gone?
Hi, Calamity. Reassured, she returned to the front door and eyed her nemesis, the wood-burning stove. Ready to dance again? Are you talking to the stove? Lauren asked as he came inside, ducking through the doorway. Were you talking to a plant? She countered. Cass entered, walking on his tendrils. Hey! Opening the stove, she saw it had been cleaned out. Fresh wood was inside as well as wood shavings ready to be tinder. No piles of dust and no leaves. No piles of dust and no leaves. She wondered if this was due to Kaz or to Laurent. Regardless, it was done. She told herself to be grateful, not annoyed. Taking the fire starter off its hook, she knelt in front of the stove. You can do this, she told herself. She wished she didn't. You can do this, she told herself. She wished she didn't have an audience. On the other hand, if the cottage filled with smoke again, this time it wouldn't be her fault. She struck the fire starter and sparks flew onto the kindling. Blow on it, Laurent suggested. Kyla blew on the tiny flames, certain she was going to blow them out, but no. They grew larger and flames spread, dancing onto the other tinder and curled onto the logs. Sitting back, pleased, she shut the stove door. As he waited for the stove to heat, Laurent helped himself to a glass of water from the sink. She watched him drink it while trying not to look like she was watching him. Now that he was inside, he seemed even taller than he had before. He was a lot of person, filling her space, and she had no idea what to say to him. She felt as if she'd used up all her words in the village. When all this talking is over, I'm not going to speak for a week. Of course, she could thank him for fixing her chimney. That was an obvious thing she could say. She knew she should be grateful, even if it had been an unsolicited help. Thank you for fixing my chimney, she said at the same time as he said, what did you think of the village? And then they paused awkwardly as she said, it was very nice, she said. At the same time, he said, you're welcome. It's what your parents would have done for me. And then you knew my parents? She asked as he said, I'm glad you liked it. Cass stood between them and held up his leaves. Guys, stop. This is painful. Don't either of you know how to have a conversation. Let the plant teach you. First you talk, then you talk, then you. Kyla blushed and Laurent laughed. It really was such a nice, warm laugh. She wished she could forget she was annoyed at him, but he'd invaded her privacy. And dangerous thing when she had stolen spell books just a room away. You don't remember me, do you? He said. She realized he must have been staring again, thinking about his laugh. I was about 10 when you moved. I watched your family sail off in the tree over there. He pointed out the window at a curved tree trunk that bent over the cove. Glad you didn't fall off, she said. I have good grip. That's useful, Kyla said, then winced inwardly. First she chased a chicken around the yard, and now she was conversing like she never had supper with a person before. She really should have practiced talking to people more in the library. She tried to think of the last time she had a meal with anyone but Kaz. She came up with nothing. Huh, that's rather sad. She never thought of her life in the library was sad before, and she wasn't sure she liked the point of view. I was happy there, without anyone. There was no reason for her to need to be making friends left and right here. You were kind to me when others weren't. Your parents as well. Kyla blinked at him. She had no memory of being kind or unkind to him. I'm sorry, I don't. He smiled. It was a long time ago. Suffice to say, I owe your family. Damn. He smiled. It was a long time ago. Suffice to say, I owe your family. He told us so. I think it's hot enough. Cracking the eggs, he whisked them and poured them into the pan. As she watched, she mixed in scallions that he produced from pants pocket, as well as a tomato. He just had fucking scallions in his pocket? Who just has scallions in their pockets? Apparently this man. And who has a whole ass tomato? Why do you have a tomato in your pocket? What the hell? You had a tomato in there? Laurent shrugged. You never know when you'll need... No! You never know when you'll need one. I think you really do know, Cass said. How many tomato emergencies do you encounter? Actually, I'd forgotten it was in my pocket until now. I'd harvested right before I saw all the smoke billowing up from your house. I didn't want to take the time to put it in my kitchen. He sounded a bit sheepish. I thought you might be in danger. He rushed here to save her. Very neighborly indeed. In a few minutes, he had it assembled. Eggs, scallions, and tomato. On toast that he'd slice and toss on the hot stove while she was busy marveling at the fact that someone had come to save her. When the great library burned, the place where she'd spent over a decade of her life, no one had tried to help her. No one checked on her. No one warned her. If Cass had been alert, she wouldn't have even noticed that the other... Cass hadn't been alert, she wouldn't have even noticed that the other librarians had fled. Not one of them had said, you should come with us or at least save yourself. But this man who had known her for all of 5 minutes, or since childhood, if that was true, he'd rushed here not knowing if he'd have to pull her from a burning fire. She stared at him, unsure what to think of him, as if he placed her plate, heaped with food on one side of the table. 1 second. He ducked out the back door in the garden and returned a moment later with a fistful of daisies. He plopped them into a canning jar filled with water and then set on the table as a centerpiece. From one of the kitchen drawers, he produced napkins decorated with light blue flowers. He laid mismatched forks and knives on the napkins and then sat on the other side of the table. Hope you like it. She stared at the daisies, then at the eggs, while she began to eat. Belatedly, she cut herself a wedge of toast with omelet and lifted it to her mouth. It was nearly, but not quite hot enough to burn her tongue. She tasted the sharpness of the onion, the smoothness of the egg. Somehow he managed to make it light and creamy, unlike the rubbery egg she'd eaten in the library, and the tang of the tomato. He knew both how to fix chimneys and cook. They ate in silence for a moment. Kyla tried to think of what to talk about. You said you heard mer horses? He smiled and his smile lit up on his face. I do. I can show them to you sometimes. You could even ride one if you'd like. Half of her wanted to say no. I'm not here to make friends. She was here to lie low in a safe place, and unobtrusive as possible in case the chaos from the capital city spilled outward. She was here to hide until it all passed. Besides, she wasn't even sure she liked him, despite the fact he'd been helpful and friendly and was a good cook. How did he make the egg so cloud-like? Regardless, he didn't seem to understand the concept of keeping a polite distance and waiting to be invited. On the other hand, what harm could it do? They were a very long way from Elysium, and she'd always wanted to see a mer horse up close. Thank you, maybe sometime. Great, he said. That wasn't a yes. Oh, okay. I kind of feel bad for him, but at the same time... Oh my god. She's funny. I love her. Taking a breath, she told herself to quit being ornery. It was nice of him to invite her just because she was tired was not an excuse to be rude. Sorry, I just never mind. He ate another bite and gestured at the stove. You know, the next time you need help with anything, you should just ask. Any goodwill she might have felt drained away. And the next time you want to help with anything, you should just ask, she snapped. He blinked. She pointed a fork at him. I didn't ask you to come over and chomp around on my roof. I didn't want you here, especially when I wasn't home. He reeled back. I was trying to help. She cashed time and said, he did fix it and I was here. She knew that. It's just, if he didn't understand, she didn't know how to explain it to him. You invaded my privacy multiple times. She waved her hand at the stove, the eggs, the daisies, the napkins. It was a simple stuff with her in confusion. Kyla squeezed her eyes shut. She reminded herself that her chimney was fixed. The eggs were delicious and the crates were undisturbed. No harm had been done. Yet, he had to understand, though, that this wasn't acceptable. I don't want you to get an impression that it's okay to come over whenever you want. We aren't friends. Ah. She opened her eyes. He was staring at his plate, clearly unsure what to say. She was torn between wanting to take all the words back and being glad she'd spoken up. He had to know he couldn't keep dropping by, poking his nose wherever he wanted. It wasn't safe, not with the secret she was keeping. She couldn't afford any uninvited visitors. He fell into another, even more awkward silence. Kaz spoke. So do mer horses eat plants? Oh. I love Kaz. I love Kaz so much. Oh god, Kaz is so funny. How much? At dawn, Kyla tackled the garden. It was key to her being able to stay here. The food she'd brought in the village wouldn't last long. She didn't have enough coin left over to buy much more. And after yesterday, she didn't expect or want any more gifts from her overly friendly neighbor. She had to make this work. Standing in the backyard, she put her hands on her hips and surveyed the tangle of green. The sun had warmed the air and now heated her shoulders and the back of her hair. She tied her hair back from her face with a ribbon, and she dressed in one of her mother's old dresses. an earth-colored patchwork of soft browns and greens with lots of pockets for holding trowels and clippers and extra garden gloves. Her boots had been her mother's as well, sturdy leather boots softened with age and that could handle the dirt. The earth beneath the soles of her boots felt soft as a quilt, like it wanted her to lie down and be engulfed in the garden. Cass sat beside her, his leaves curled around his soil, as if nervous the vines would envelop him too. Vines had crept over the fence and swallowed whatever had previously grown here. Wheat had sprouted and taken over every inch of soil. Everywhere she looked was a riot of green. Choked by vines, a tree bent over the right fence. A few of its limbs were leafless, and the birds with orange and green feathers perched on it. Puffing its chest out, it trilled a descending melody. Across the garden, another bird answered like a coo-like call. Elsewhere in the woods beyond the garden, more birds chirped and sang. A breeze whisked across the garden, and the leaves shimmered in the sunlight as they fluttered. She inhaled the heavy scent of the green growing things. She could smell a hint of honey within the breeze, and she didn't know which flower it came from. Prickly bushes with pale blue flowers filled one corner, and shoots with balls of purple flowers towered over another. She breathed in again and thought the nobles of Elysium would have paid fistfuls of money to smell as light and lovely as the air of country. Just breathing it in made her feel like she was waking up again after a night of perfect deep sleep. She never felt quite aware of the taste and feel of the air, or of the sound of the birds and the gentle rustle of leaves. It made her feel like she could tackle on any challenge, if only she knew exactly how. Any idea where we start? Kyla asked Cass. How am I supposed to know? Well, I feel like you might be an expert in vegetation. He was quiet for a moment. That is true. So tell me, what's a weed and what isn't? Kyla said. There's no such thing as a weed, Kaz said. That's a cruel term made up by people who label some plants as unwanted and some as valuable, as if the worth of a living thing is measured by how useful it is to another living thing. As if a plant can't have its own intrinsic worth. He was so worked up that he raised his leaves high and shook them. It was the longest, most passionate speech she'd ever heard the spider plant make. In her soothing library voice, Kyla said, All right, from here on, the word weed is banned in this garden. He lowered his leaves, pleased. How about you tell me about the plant?
Why is the rum always gone?
Hi, Jay. How about you tell me which plants are which and we'll organize them, so they all have the chance to thrive. We can designate areas for different kinds of plants and transplant the rest outside the fence, like at the library. She walked toward the east side of the garden. Here's the non-fiction section. Vegetables only here. New studies and treaties, Kaz said, designating an area at the front of the non-fiction section. Your seeds can go here, and in the back, histories. That's the old growth. In the front of the college, fiction. That'll all be flowers. What about the berries? Journals of scientific papers. She decided because of the way the brambles both supported and strangled one another along the far fence. They planned it out, giving each type of plant a corresponding book designation. Kyla hauled the gardening equipment out of the house. Kaz held the smaller tools, the trowel and clippers, with his tendrils, and she wielded the hoe and shovel. Focusing on the front section, they set to work. By the time the sun reached midday, they cleared a 5-by-5 foot area in new studies, which wasn't much on the grand scheme of things, of an overwhelming overgrowth, but it was enough, she judged, to plant some of the seeds she'd brought. Kaz coaxed her through the technique. A hole for each seed, then water, then soil to top, then more water. She placed them out according to his directions and then sat back, satisfied. It was an excellent start, and it wasn't so different from organizing a bookshelf. A bit dirtier, but she'd gotten just as sweaty hauling books from shelf to shelf. The birds continued to sing to one another, and the breeze cooled the sweat on her neck. Her lungs felt full of the sweetest honey air, and the ache in her muscles was a good kind of ache. You know they won't sprout instantly. It'll be weeks. That punctured her mood. Yes, she knew intellectually it would take time before there was anything to harvest. She hadn't thought through the implications. It was indeed a problem, especially since she lost the chicken. She'd counted on the hen to lay eggs until the garden began to produce. She'd also hoped that some of the old growth, corralled into histories, would be edible. Unfortunately, the vast majority of the vegetation was what some, not her, would call weeds. I don't have that kind of time. She needed to produce food quickly if she was going to be able to live here. After the incident with the chimney, she wasn't about to ask Laurent for handouts. That would completely undo the point she'd been trying to make, which she wasn't sure she'd even understood to begin with, and she'd seen the villagers didn't have extra spare. I won't beg. Kyla poured water on Cass's soil ball and ate 2 more cinnamon buns, as well as the rest of the cheese Laurent had left for her. She was proud of the progress she'd made, but what was she going to do in the short term? I could work. If there were any jobs, there certainly weren't any library jobs. She hadn't even seen a bookshop. She thought of Brent and wondered if she needed any help in the bakery. Not that Kyla knew anything about baking. If Brent did need an assistant, wouldn't she have hired one of the locals already? The fact was there might not be any jobs to be had. Besides, any village job would take Kyla away from the spell books for too long. She needed to be nearby to watch over them. That had to remain her first priority. She'd taken on that responsibility when she'd taken the books, and she wasn't about to abandon it. She had to take care of the books.
Oof. She's going through it.
She wondered. Could the books help take care of me? I have an idea, she told Cass. Terrible, terrifying, wonderful idea.
Come on.
Kyla went inside, washed the dirt off her hands, and then dried them thoroughly before heading to the back room, where the crates sat quietly. She threw off the tarp. She knew precisely what they'd packed into each crate, and she had a loose idea of which book she needed. Have a question you can't answer, she said, parroting one of the father's favorite sayings. What do you do? Look in a book, Cass answered. But Kyla, spell books? She pried off the top of the 4th crate. I know. It's not permitted. She saw the librarian who had been turned into wood, and felt her heart thump hard in her chest. Her palm began to sweat, but she steeled herself. By whom? She said to Cass. The Emperor had been tossed out a window. The Emperor had been tossed out of a window. He wasn't going to object or no. Who will notice? More accurately, who will notice and care? The ones who'd make the laws had been overthrown. Most likely by now they were all dead. A new government had been installed, and she'd read their pamphlets. Magic belongs to the people now. I'm people, and I'm very far from Elysium. She lifted out the spellbook on plant work. Sitting cross-legged on the floor, Kyla flipped the pages. She inhaled the familiar, dusty scent of beloved old books and instantly felt like she was heading in the right direction. She'd read every book in these crates, and she knew there was a useful spell for plant growth somewhere. On the use of roses for defense purposes, she'd read. Not that. For aid in childbirth, the list of ingredients include chamomile and stinging nettles. A fertility spell followed, requiring sea urchin and seahorse eggs. She kept looking, wishing this grimoire had a table of contents. Maybe that could be her project while she was in Culture, creating indices for the volume she'd rescued. After, of course, she figured out how to stave off starvation. If she didn't index all the books, maybe this transgression would be forgiven, or maybe it wouldn't need to be. Surely no one would begrudge her keeping herself alive, especially if no one ever found out what she'd done. A few more pages, and she had it. The spell for accelerated growth of plants had been created by the sorcerer Lycan in the last century. Lycan was renowned for his greenhouses. They dominated half of the island of Belda, and were said to include every species to grow anywhere in the Crescent Islands. One entire room was devoted to poisonous plants, another to varieties of orchids, and one said to be filled with ferns that grew so lush you couldn't see more than a few inches in any direction. There was even whispers to be one section of the greenhouse full of plants that didn't exist anywhere else. Plants created entirely by magic. Like Kaz. She skimmed the ingredients list. Water, easy. Blood, unpleasant but easy. Duckweed, she wasn't certain what that was, but Kaz should know. Elder brush leaves, again she'd ask Kaz. Rosebuds from a beach rose. The instructions were a mix of ingredients. Were to mix the ingredients into a paste and add a teaspoon to the soil above each seed, and then say the words, pronouncing them as precisely as possible. Every spell was written in the first language, a long dead and ancient tongue. According to all that Kyla had read in the subject, the first language was the language of creation, comprised of words that tapped into the core essence of existence. Utter the right syllables in conjunction with the correct ingredients, and you could alter the shape of that existence.
This is crazy.
A spell from one of these books had altered Kaz. From an ordinary houseplant to what he'd become. Other spells more advanced than this one had created the canals, shaped the mountains, and tamed the sea. This was what she needed to know. This is what she needed now. Are any of those shrubs outside elder bushes? Kyla asked. Elderberry is a fast-growing deciduous shrub with little white flowers and dark berries, Kaz said. And yes, I've seen several. Follow me. With Kaz's help, she identified and plucked the elder leaves from a bush in their garden. Then she dumped them in a bowl in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed between the vines over the window as she worked. First ingredient, done. Duckweed? She asked. A fast-growing aquatic plant. Well, she knew where there was water. On a mission now, she led the way down the stone steps back to the cove. Walking out on the dock, straddling the broken slats, Kyla peered into the water and beside the library boat. Gentle waves lapped at the posts of the dock. Shaded by trees that clung to the side of the cove, the air was cooler and smelled of salt and seaweed, rather than flowers and honey. She loved both smells. She wondered what it felt like to dip herself into the water, but she had a task to complete. She called to Kaz, who was back on shore. What does it look like? Smell. Small, lentil-like beads of green that float just on or below the surface. He recited from memory, usually found in still or slow-moving fresh water. Kyla raised her eyebrows. Fresh water? Oh, yeah, sorry. I should have thought of that earlier. Back up the steps. Back up the steps. A hint of movement from within the water caught her eye. Beneath the surface, a mer baby swam around the post docks, weaving in and out of it were a game. It was a little boy with seaweed hair and pale green fishtail lace with silver strands. He swam gracefully, the water curved around him, the sea grasses brushing his belly, rippling flowed above him. She hadn't seen a merbaby in years, not since she was a child. They didn't live in the canals of the capital city, too polluted. Waving at him, Kyla smiled. Bubbles rose from the water and then popped up on the surface, sounding like a giggle as the baby waved back with his webbed hand and then flipped his tail fin and swam toward deeper waters. A miracle, she thought. Standing, she looked toward the jetty and saw a mermaid, half out of the water on one of the rocks, keeping watch. Kyla waved at her as well, and she thought she saw the mermaid smile before she ducked beneath the surface. It was said if you weren't welcome on an island, the merfolk would foul the water near your home and refuse to swim close to the shore. The sight of a merbaby, she knew was only superstition that they predicted good fortune, but it made her feel as if her luck was turning. I'm doing the sensible thing. It'll be all right. I'll be careful. Let's find that duckweed, she said. Climbing back up the steps, Kyla led the way, feeling full of energy and hope. In a sense that she was in the right track, at last, she had memories of a quiet pool in the woods where she'd retreat with her books, hiding from chores that needed to be done around the house. She remembered the sound of her parents after sunset, calling her to come home. The fireflies would flicker around her as it became too dark to read, but still she stayed to watch the fireflies over the water and listen to the birds and squirrels settle in for the night, and the night hunters, the owls and the cats, began to wake. Once she'd even glimpse a unicorn sipping at the pond, but it could have been only a white deer in a trick of the twilight. Another afternoon, her father had come with her, avoiding his chores too. They'd read books side by side, and her mother hadn't said a word when they returned. A week later, her mother had been the one to join her by the pond, arrived with a lunch in a basket, and presenting Kyla with a new unread book, a rare treasure on the island.
Oh, her parents loved her so much.
Kyla hadn't thought about those memories in years. After her parents had died, it hurt too much to think about them. But now, to her surprise, it didn't hurt. Or rather, it did, but it was a sweeter ache than it used to be. She found the pond close to the house. Then she remembered. Her memory had said it was deep within the woods, but it wasn't, only a stone's throw. Staring at it, she realized that she never truly hidden from her parents. They'd always known exactly where she was and how to find her, but they'd chosen to let her come here. They'd given her those afternoons of peace as a gift, joining her when they could. Kaz said, interrupting her thoughts, duckweed. She blinked at the water and a tiny lentil-like plant floating over half the pond. Are you all right? Kaz asked. Somehow I didn't expect this to feel quite so much like coming home. She made the library her home, and after her parents' death, she hadn't looked back. She hadn't ever considered visiting Caltree. She hadn't missed it, but now she suddenly found that she wanted to stay. She wanted to make this work, even if it meant taking rest that she previously never dreamt she'd take. Times have changed. The world has changed. I can change too. Kneeling, she scooped up half the duckweeds and slid it into her sack. She knew where to find the rosebuds, on the bush of the cliff over the village. Following the trail through the forest, she and Kaz emerged into the sunlight. Everything looked just as picturesque as the day before, but this time she found herself appreciating it more. She didn't look at the village with trepidation. Instead, she admired the bright colors of the houses and the blue beyond, dotted with boats. From this distance in height, the village hadn't looked run down. You couldn't see the two thin children, or the peeling paint, or the storm damage. You saw a picture framed by the sea. Kyla gathered the rosebuds while watching the spur horses frolicking by the shore. On the cliff, the breeze tasted like both this garden and the cove. Honey sweet mixed with salty fresh. As soon as they had all the ingredients, they returned to the cottage. She mixed them in a bowl, mashing them with a pestle she found in the utensils drawer. With Kaz working the pump, she added water. She added water and used a knife to nick the tip of her index finger. She squeezed in a drop of blood. Following the instructions, she mixed it all into a paste. Do you really think you can do this? Kaz asked. Today, after the mermaid, she felt as if she could do anything. Yes, I don't see why not. It's ingredients and a recipe.
Now I'm challenging mission of life saving.
She repeated Bryn's words. Anyone can do it. She wasn't trying to create a canal or craft a palace after all. It's just about being the one to choose to do it. You're a librarian, not a sorcerer. Is there a difference? They've trained. And I've read, Kyla said. If it's so simple, why are the laws to keep spells out of the hands of people? She never questioned the laws before or really thought about them much. She'd had a job to maintain the spellbooks in her area's collection. And she never considered how they were used or weren't used by the library's patrons, because knowledge is power, and the powerful wanted to keep it all to themselves. Their greed had brought upon their downfall. Not because it's dangerous. Of course knowledge is dangerous. Kyla felt herself grinning. She'd never done anything the least bit dangerous before. It felt like a deep breath of sea air. Maybe the taste of the breeze is going to my head. But ignorance is even more dangerous. In this case, ignorance means failure, and failure means no food. No way to stay here, and nowhere else to go. Kaz accepted that and followed her out to the garden, where they planted the seeds. She sat next to them cross-legged, and the spellbook opened on one of her father's old, but now clean shirts to protect it from the dirt. Using a spoon, she scooped a teaspoon of the paste onto each of the mounds where she planted a seed. She then read from the book. I ain't fucking reading that. I don't know how the hell that's even said. She pronounced the words precisely and carefully, drawing on her knowledge from her studies. There was scholarly debate over the inflection of each word, and she had followed all the discourse. She knew which syllables to stress and which to swallow, and she knew how long to stress the vowels and which required a guttural sound. This was the magic made from the music of words, and she spoke the syllables to the seeds with every bit of conviction that this was right and that this would work. When she finished, she closed the spellbook and waited. Did it work? Kaz asked. Side by side, they stared at the earth, willing the little seeds to sprout and grow. It'll work, Kyla said. I know it will. She'd seen that mere baby in the cove. That wasn't a sign that she was supposed to be here and thrive here then. It was a sign, she thought, and they will grow. From within the house, she heard Lauren call, "Anyone home?" This man. That was a good few chapters. That was actually pretty funny. But I could get what she's coming from. Okay, gonna come back over here. But anyways, let's see, check. I kind of forget, what am I doing tomorrow? I think I'm pretty sure I'm off tomorrow. Pretty sure I'm having my rest day tomorrow. Pretty sure. I'm just checking right now. Um, 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 um. No! Okay. No, I'm not. Okay. I made my damn schedule, but I forget my damn schedule. I'm playing Klein tomorrow. It is a dating game. A little bit yandere dating game. So, look out for that. I'm doing that tomorrow at 3 p.m. Central. I don't know about the other. I don't know about any other time changes. I don't know how to, I don't know. I think Eastern, it'll be 4. I'm not sure. Anyway, I'm not gonna even bother. 3 p.m. Central and whatever it is your time zone. And yeah, I know that's what I'm doing tomorrow. All right. So with that, I will be heading out now. So good night, goodbye, or whenever you're watching this. I hope I can see you next time. Bye.